She left him for his billionaire brother, but at the inheritance reading, they discovered who the real billionaire was. Ken stood quietly at the altar, dressed in his finest suit, holding a small bouquet of fresh flowers. He looked calm, but his heart was racing. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of his life, his wedding day. Guests filled the church, waiting, watching. The music played softly, but the bride never came. Ina, the woman he had loved since they were children, was missing. Minutes turned into hours. The flowers in his hand began to wilt. The whispers started. People began murmuring, looking at each other with wide eyes. "She's not coming," someone said. "Did you hear? She ran away with his brother. Zuberi, the billionaire." The news spread like wildfire. Some guests gasped. Others shook their heads in disbelief. How could Ina leave Ken like this? And for his own brother. But Ken didn't cry. He didn't shout or ask questions. He didn't even look surprised. He just lowered his eyes, turned around, and walked out of the church without saying a word. No one knew where he was going. No one dared to stop him. He vanished. Just like that. No phone calls, no messages, no goodbyes. Everyone kept talking for days. Where is Ken? Did he go abroad? Is he okay? But there were no answers. All that remained was the image of a groom left at the altar, and a story that was only just beginning. Ina thought she had made the right choice. She left Ken at the altar and followed Zuberi, his billionaire brother, into a life full of money, travel, and fame. Everything looked perfect at first. She was now wearing expensive clothes, flying in private jets, sleeping in the most beautiful hotels, and taking pictures on private islands. People called her lucky. They said she made the best decision by choosing Zuberi, the richer brother. But behind all the luxury, something wasn't right. Zuberi smiled in public, but when they were alone, he often talked about Ken. Not in a kind way, in a jealous way. He would stare at his phone, looking at old family pictures, and whisper things like, "No matter how rich I become, father always looked at Ken like he was the golden child." Ina would laugh and tell him to forget about it, to move on. "You're the one with everything now," she would say. Ken is gone, but Zuberi couldn't let it go. He compared everything he had to Ken. If someone praised Ken in an old video, Zuberi would get angry. If Ina mentioned something about the past, even a small memory of Ken, his face would tighten. He was always trying to prove he was better, louder, richer, as if he was fighting with a ghost. Ina tried to ignore it. She kept herself busy with shopping, parties, and vacations, but the more time passed, the more she saw the cracks. Zuberi was never truly happy. Even when he bought a new yacht or made a big business deal, he didn't smile with peace. He smiled with pride, like he was trying to prove something. Slowly, Ina started to feel like she wasn't in a loving relationship, but in a strange competition she never signed up for. Late at night, she would lie awake thinking about Ken. Not because she missed him romantically, but because she wondered how someone so calm and quiet had such a strong presence. Zuberi had everything, yet he still talked about Ken. That thought began to bother her. What was it about Ken that made him so unforgettable? And then, small things started to fall apart. In Zuberi's business, in his behavior, even in their relationship. The glamorous life began to feel heavy. The price of loving the richer brother wasn't just losing Ken. It was living with a man who was always looking over his shoulder, searching for the shadow of someone he couldn't beat. After the wedding disaster, Ken completely disappeared. Not a single person saw him again for months. No phone calls, no social media, no messages. It was like he vanished from the earth. People in the town started talking. Everyone had their own story. Some said, Ken joined a monastery far away to find peace. Others whispered, he left the country to start a new life. One woman at the market swore she saw him working on a farm with old clothes and a beard. Nobody really knew what happened, and that made the mystery even bigger. Even the people who knew Ken well were confused. He wasn't the type to run away. He was always quiet, calm, and smart. But after Ina left him for his brother Zuberi, something inside him broke. People thought he was heartbroken, hiding somewhere and crying over lost love. But the truth was very different. Ken didn't run away to hide. He disappeared to grow. While everyone was talking, guessing, and laughing behind his back, Ken was busy building something powerful. He didn't post about it. He didn't tell anyone. He just worked. Day and night, in silence. He read, studied, planned, and connected with people who believed in big dreams. He was building a new future, one that had nothing to do with pain or revenge. It had everything to do with purpose. But make no mistake, Ken was hurt, deeply. The betrayal from Ina and Zuberi left scars on his heart. But instead of letting those scars destroy him, he used them to push himself forward. Every time he felt the pain, he worked harder. Every time he remembered the whispers at the church, he focused more. His silence wasn't weakness, it was strength, a quiet storm. While the world thought he had faded into nothing, Ken was rising in the shadows. No one could see it yet, but soon, the same people who gossiped about his shame would hear his name in places they never expected. He wasn't trying to prove anything to them. He was just becoming the man he was always meant to be, far away from noise, fake love, and broken promises. Ken's silence became the town's biggest mystery, but soon, that silence would speak louder than any words ever could. One morning, the whole town woke up to shocking news. Chief Adeyemi, the powerful and respected father of Ken and Zuberi, had died suddenly in his sleep. No one saw it coming. Just the day before, he had been smiling, giving orders, and even planning a big family event. His death was like a dark cloud that covered everything. People cried, friends and family gathered. It felt like the end of an era. At the funeral, everyone wore black. The air was heavy with sadness, but behind the quiet tears, something else was bubbling. Tension. Zuberi stood tall beside Ina, both dressed in fine black clothes, their faces serious. But if you look closely, there was a certain pride in Zuberi's eyes. He wasn't just mourning, he was waiting. As the guests arrived, some whispered, "Now that the chief is gone, who will take over everything?" Others looked around, noticing someone was missing. Ken, the man who once stood as the true first son, but he had vanished months ago, and many believed he had given up on the family completely. Zuberi leaned closer to Ina and softly said, "Don't worry, soon this will all be ours. The house, the business, the power." Ina nodded with a small smile. She believed him. Why wouldn't she? Zuberi had been by the chief's side for years. He had the money, the fame, and now with Ken gone, who else could take over? As the ceremony ended, people kept asking about the will. When is the inheritance reading? Who did Chief Adeyemi leave everything to? Zuberi pretended to be calm, but inside, he was already celebrating. He thought he knew what was coming. He believed everything was finally falling into his hands. The life, the empire, the name. But what he didn't know was that a storm was already on its way. A storm in the form of a name that no one had heard in months. While Zuberi stood there thinking he had won, a hidden truth was waiting to explode. Ina held his hand tightly, still smiling, still trusting. She had no idea that the world they thought they owned it's about to be shaken to its core. Chief Adeyemi's death wasn't just the end of a father's life. It was the beginning of a great reveal. And soon, the real story would unfold, one that would change everything they thought they knew about power, loyalty, and true wealth. The day of the inheritance reading finally arrived, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. The large family house was filled with people, uncles, aunties, cousins, even distant relatives who hadn't been seen in years. Everyone was dressed in their best clothes, pretending to be sad, but deep down, most of them were there for one reason: to hear who would get the chief's fortune. Lawyers in black suits walked in carrying files. Cameras from news reporters flashed outside. Chief Adeyemi was a big man in the business world, and people across the country were waiting to see who would take over his empire. Zuberi sat comfortably at the front of the room, legs crossed, a confident smile on his face. He didn't look worried at all. To him, this moment was just a formality. In his mind, the riches were already his. Beside him sat Ina, shining in her diamond earrings and expensive black dress. She held Zuberi's hand tightly, her eyes fixed on the lawyers, waiting to hear her new title, wife of the next Chief Adeyemi. The room fell silent as the head lawyer opened a brown envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He cleared his throat and read slowly. As per Chief Adeyemi's final wishes, the entirety of his wealth, including all land, houses, business shares and accounts, will go to... Zuberi sat up straight. Ina's eyes sparkled. The whole room leaned in. Ken Adeyemi. For a moment it was like the world stopped breathing. Ken? Someone whispered. Zuberi blinked. Ina froze. Murmurs spread across the room like wildfire. Did he just say Ken? But Ken disappeared. Isn't Zuberi the one who stayed? Zuberi jumped to his feet. That's impossible. Ken ran away. He left everything. He didn't care about this family. But the lawyer stayed calm. Chief Adeyemi updated his will just 2 months before his death. In his words, Ken has shown strength, wisdom, and independence. He is the one worthy of this legacy. Gasps filled the room. Ina's hand dropped from Zuberi's. Her diamonds didn't shine the same anymore. Zuberi's face turned red with shock and anger. He had everything. The money, the public image, the wife. But the one thing he wanted most, the power, was just given to the brother everyone thought had vanished. Suddenly, the cameras outside turned toward the gate. A black car pulled in slowly. Someone stepped out. It was Ken, calm, quiet, dressed simply. And just like that, the man they all forgot had returned, not as the broken groom, but as the true heir. Ken! Which Ken? The room went silent again after Zuberi's loud outburst. His voice shook with anger and confusion. He looked at the lawyer as if waiting for a correction, as if the man had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Ina sat frozen. Her mouth was slightly open. She blinked a few times like she didn't hear it right. Around them, people whispered, "Did he say Ken Adeyemi? Isn't that the one who disappeared? I thought he was poor now." The lawyer didn't flinch. He looked directly at Zuberi and said clearly, "Yes, Ken Adeyemi, founder and CEO of Torchline Technologies. He is now the richest investor in West Africa." The whole room gasped again. Even the journalists outside started shouting and pushing forward, trying to hear more. The name Torchline Technologies rang a bell in many people's minds. It was a fast-rising tech company making headlines all over the continent, but no one ever knew the face behind it, until now. Zuberi's eyes widened. Ina turned pale. "What do you mean?" "Ken is the CEO," she asked softly, barely able to speak. The lawyer nodded. While everyone thought Ken disappeared, he was quietly building a business from scratch. He started small, very small, but he worked day and night. No interview, no pictures, no noise, just results. The guests couldn't believe it. This was the same Ken who had been left at the altar, the same Ken who walked away silently and didn't even show his face for months. Zuberi's hands were shaking now. His plan, his whole life, had just been turned upside down. He had spent years trying to impress their father. Fancy suits, fast cars, loud business moves. But the quiet brother, the one everyone thought was weak, had become more powerful than all of them. And he did it without a word. Ina couldn't stop staring at the door. A part of her was hoping it would open, hoping Ken would walk in and tell her it wasn't too late, that maybe they could talk. But deep inside, she knew she had left gold for glitter. And now the truth was shining brighter than ever. As people began talking again, one thing was clear. The forgotten son had returned, not just rich, but respected. He didn't need anyone to see him rise, because Ken didn't come to take revenge. He came to claim what he had earned, with silence, with hard work, and with fire in his soul. Ina couldn't sleep. After the inheritance reading, her mind was spinning like a storm. She kept asking herself, how did Ken become so powerful? How did I not see it? How did I leave him for someone else? She called every number she could find, trying to reach Ken. No response. She even went to the Torchline office, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. But all she saw were his staff, polite, sharp, professional, who kept telling her, "Mr. Ken is not available for meetings at this time. Please," she whispered to one of them, eyes filled with tears. "Just tell him Ina wants to talk." But there was no reply. Ken stayed silent. At home, things were not the same. Zuberi no longer smiled at her. He barely looked her way. He sat alone for hours, drinking or staring at his phone. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak much. The man who once showed off gifts and vacations now walked around the mansion like a shadow. And the mansion, it didn't feel beautiful anymore. The walls felt too high. The gold didn't shine the same. Ina sat by the poolside one evening and realized she hadn't laughed in weeks. She missed Ken. Not just the new rich Ken, but the old Ken, the one who laughed with his whole heart. who wrote her small notes, who believed in dreams. She thought back to how he waited for her at the altar, holding flowers. She had walked away from that man, and now she couldn't even reach him. One night, Zuberi finally spoke. "You miss him, don't you?" Ina looked at him. "I just want to talk." Zuberi laughed bitterly. "He doesn't need you anymore. He built an empire while you were busy chasing status." Ina turned away. She couldn't argue, because it was true. Every room in the house reminded her of what she gave up. Every quiet dinner felt like punishment. Her friends, once full of praise, now gossiped behind her back. People started calling her the woman who left a king for a crown. Ina realized she was trapped, not by walls or gates, but by her own choices. The glitter, the wealth, the lifestyle, it all felt empty without love. And Ken, he still hadn't spoken a single word to her, but his silence, it was louder than anything she had ever heard. The sun was setting, and the orange sky reflected softly on the water. At the old wooden pier, the same place where young hearts once dreamed, Ken finally appeared. No bodyguards, no fancy cars, just him, in simple clothes, calm like the ocean in front of him. Ina was already waiting. Her heart beat fast as she saw him walking toward her. This was the moment she had prayed for. She thought he'd look different, colder, more powerful, but he was still the Ken she remembered, just stronger now. She stood up quickly. "Ken," she whispered, tears already forming. "You came." Ken nodded but said nothing. His eyes didn't show anger or hate, just quiet strength. They both sat on the edge of the pier, like they used to in their teenage years. For a while, neither spoke. Only the sound of water and the distant cry of birds filled the silence. Ina turned to him, eyes wet. "I'm sorry. I made a mistake." Ken didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the waves. "No, Ina," he said softly. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice." His words hit her like thunder. "I was hurting," he continued. "But I didn't hate you. I just had to disappear. Not to hide, but to heal. I didn't build my life to prove anything to you. I built it because I had to find myself again." Ina tried to reach for his hand, but he gently pulled it away. "I was weak back then," he said. "Always waiting, hoping, loving you more than myself. But now I see clearly. You left not because I had nothing, but because I wasn't shining loud enough for you. And that's okay." Tears rolled down Ina's cheeks. She wanted to explain, to beg, to turn things back. But Ken stood up. "Love isn't about who has more," he said. "It's about who stays when there's nothing." Ina broke down, sobbing quietly. "I thought I was choosing gold," she whispered. "But I lost the real treasure." Ken gave a sad smile. "Sometimes we only learn after we lose." He walked away, leaving her on the pier with the memories, the regret, and the empty sound of waves. That day, Ina finally understood. Love is not something you chase after riches. It's something you protect, even in the dark. But by the time she saw it, the light was already gone. Zuberi sat in his office, eyes glued to the TV. Every news channel was talking about Ken, the missing brother who had become a silent billionaire. Ken's company, Torchline Technologies, was growing fast. Investors were flooding in. Awards were piling up. Zuberi couldn't take it. He slammed his glass on the table. "Why is it always Ken?" he shouted. Ina tried to calm him, but Zuberi was lost in jealousy. Day by day, he became angrier, colder, and more obsessed. He wanted to destroy Ken's success, not just beat him, but crush him completely. So he came up with a wicked plan. He created a fake scandal, hired people to lie, paid reporters to write bad stories about Ken's company. He thought, if I ruin his name, his empire will fall. But Ken stayed quiet. He didn't fight back in public. Instead, his legal team moved smartly. Quietly, they gathered proof. They didn't just prove the scandal was fake. They uncovered something worse. Zuberi had been secretly taking money from their late father's trust fund, money meant for charity and family support. He used it to buy expensive cars, private jets, and luxury trips for him and Ina. When the truth came out, it was everywhere. Front-page news, viral videos, breaking stories. The media turned on Zuberi. His partners left him. His accounts were frozen. Police came to his mansion and arrested him in front of everyone. Ina stood there, watching, her heart beating fast. She tried to reach for his hand as they took him away, but Zuberi looked away, ashamed. At the court, the crowd was huge. Reporters pushed for photos. Zuberi's lawyers tried to delay things, but it was too late. The documents were clear. The betrayal was public. His own father's name was now tied to disgrace because of him. Ina waited outside the courtroom, dressed in black again, but this time, not for a funeral, for her broken pride. People stared at her, whispered about her, the woman who left one brother for another and lost both. No friends stood with her, no family came to support. She was alone, and somewhere far away, Ken sat in peace, not because he wanted revenge, but because he chose to walk a better path. Zuberi's fall wasn't because Ken fought him, it was because envy always burns itself in the end. And Ina, she now understood that love built on jealousy and greed never lasts. After all the drama and pain, Ken stood quietly in his office one calm morning. The huge fortune left by his father was now in his hand. But Ken didn't keep it all for himself. Instead, he gave most of it away. He started schools, gave scholarships, and built libraries for children who didn't have much. He wanted to help them learn and grow, just like his father always dreamed. He named the project after his father, Chief Adeyemi, to honor the man who raised him, even when things were hard. Ken believed education was the true treasure, more valuable than money or power. Then, without fanfare, Ken left the country. He traveled to small towns and villages, teaching young people about life, business, and hope. He lived simply, far from the busy cities and loud headlines. He found peace in helping others and living with purpose. One day, a reporter asked him why he never fought back or tried to get revenge on his brother Zuberi and Ina. Ken smiled softly, looking calm and wise. "Power isn't something you inherit," he said. "It's something you build quietly, while everyone else is busy watching someone else." He explained that real strength comes from patience, hard work, and kindness. You don't need to prove yourself by tearing others down. Instead, build your own path quietly, and success will follow. Ken's story spread, inspiring many people. It wasn't about the money he got, but what he did with it. He showed that true wealth is not in gold or fame, but in making a difference in the world. And that is how Ken became a true billionaire, not just in riches, but in heart and respect. If you loved this story, hit that like button and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that will inspire and surprise you. Comment below. What would you do if you were in Ken's shoes? Let's talk. Fire sparks.